purpose and practice. Ayy, yeah, purpose and practice. Keep your mental sharp, learn all the tactics. Dr. Ross dropping knowledge to the masses. Man, you now tuned in to purpose and practice. Ayy, yeah, purpose and practice. Podcast game, ayy, he got it mastered. Sign call.
Peace to the purpose and practice community. We are back with another episode. We are at episode number 44. Before we get into tonight's episode, first of all, I want to say peace to everybody. Hope everybody is in good health in all phases of health, whether it's emotionally, socially, spiritually, physically. You know, we are in some crazy times where many of us are up against some obstacles. So, you know, I'm hoping that we all are out there in the best state that we can possibly be in. Remember, the Purpose and Practice podcast, we're all about bringing the stories and the narratives of folks who are out there doing some inspirational things. Some of them who may, you know, in many cases, be ordinary people just doing extraordinary things. And I think that those are the most important stories that are out there. Tonight, we get a chance to bring a story and a narrative to you. And our show is all about reaching back and bringing forward, right? So if you study, you know, the science or the history of Sankofa, the bird, you know, and what it means to our culture as Black folks, it means reaching back and bringing forward. So that's what we're going to be doing tonight. We are reaching back once again to bring forward to you, the community, a piece of history, because that's what this show is all about, is really showcasing and highlighting the voices that create community. So with that said, I'm extremely like proud. I'm inspired. I'm thankful to bring to you tonight a young brother who I have had the opportunity to know since he was probably in 7th grade. I remember the first time meeting him, it was outside of a dance at the middle school, Long Branch Middle School. And I was working my first year teaching, and I'm working at the dance, and they're telling me the people who can't get in the dance. So my boss is saying, okay, these people can't get in. And he was one of them. And I remember going out there, you know, and just start vibing and talking to the brother. And there was some other brothers out there too. And we just start connecting. And that was the first time that I met, you know, this brother, and we connected ever since then. Shout out to Regina Schaefer, who was another person who was his teacher, actually had him in middle school. And she used to share all kinds of stories about you. And that was before I had you in class. And she was like, oh my God, this kid is brilliant. Elford, you got to meet him. You know, we need to mentor him. We need to, you know, like all of these things. And then, you know, we get to high school, and I get to meet you and coach you and teach you. And with that said, we're going to hear the rest of the story. But with that said, man, I want to welcome a young man who I have had the opportunity to share spaces with over these years, and watch him grow, you know, as a man. So welcome, Aulander Daniels. Welcome, brother.
I appreciate you giving me this opportunity to be here. You know, this is a big deal. But back to that story you were telling, I forgot all about that. You know, and it's the interesting thing about that was, as I remember that encounter too, and you know, and that really kind of being like a moment for me where I was like, hold on, I gotta chill out here, because if they didn't put you in front of that door, I don't know if they would stop. You was getting But shout out to Miss Schaefer too. You know, I remember her being my teacher early on in middle school, and I was thinking about her the other day or a few weeks ago now, when 9/11 hit, because I remember being in her classroom, you know, when we got the news about all of that. So, you know, that's something that'll always stick in my memory. But I definitely appreciate, you know, you allowing me to be in this space.
No doubt, man. No doubt. And, you know, Miss Schaefer she is proud of you. It's crazy because it was, about maybe a year ago, and I don't know if I shared this story with you, but she had sent a picture to me and was like, she sent a picture. It was from, because she's in Middletown now. She teaches in Middletown, right? So she was at a basketball game, a middle school basketball game. So she sent the picture to me. She was like, Elford, is this kid looks like Orlander, right? So I was like, that's his son. And she was like, what? Like, she said, I saw him because she worked there. And she was like, I was like, oh my God, that looks like it was, sure enough, it was your son. And I told her, and she couldn't believe it. Like, she could not believe it, fam. She could not. And he's doing his thing in football right now, bro.
Yeah. It's funny too to see just some of our mannerisms and how similar they
Yes.
were, especially in the pads. But I get that a lot. Like people saying, I could tell off the bat, this is your son right here. And he is doing his thing. He got a lot going on, and I'm proud of him right now.
What, no doubt, man. And it's funny because he's the same age as when I met you. So he's right there at that age. So when I see him and I'm like, wow, man, that's like, wow, that he's right there at the same point when I met you, man. So, and we're gonna get into so much tonight, but one of the things, and I'm really, really, really excited about this episode. But one of the things that we like to do, Orlander, is we like to go back and hear about, growing up, what it was like growing up, as a child, where you grew up, how you grew up. And then we like to just venture and get into the whole story of your life. That's what our show is about. It's about sharing your story, because I really believe that there's stories out there that need to be heard, and that can be, in many cases, folks can learn from them and grow from them. So if you don't mind, man, sharing a little bit about growing up, where you grew up, what it was like growing up.
Yeah, so and anybody listening who's familiar with Long Branch will know Garfield Court, right? But if not, that's pretty much the project section of Long Branch in New Jersey, where I grew up. And I was born in '88, so I was born and raised in Long Branch up until the time I was 18. So I spent the entire '90s, in Garfield Court. And that time, if anybody know, it was a pretty wild time. So I saw it all. Like I said, I spent my entire life there until I was about 18 when I left. And my mother she had kids were young, right? She had my oldest sibling when she was just 13. And she ended up getting strung out on drugs. So, we saw it all. My mom spent some time in jail and programs and rehabs growing up. And, we had to go stay with some other people for a short period of time. And till my sister, kind of grew up real young. She had a child too when she was pretty young, at 14. So my mom was a grandmother when she was just 27, 28 years old. I tell that story and I know people are like, that's nuts. But that's what it was like growing up in Garfield Court. To me at that time, it wasn't nothing out of the ordinary. I kind of saw that stuff, going on. And I kind of want to pause for a second, because when I tell my story, I think a lot of people, look at it as like an underdog story, or start to feel kind of sad for me. But I think I was incredibly blessed. It was so many times in my life where things just turned out or just shook in the right way for me. And everything everything in my story that was kind of like a hurdle or hardship ended up working for me.
Wow.
So I guess I definitely want to say, with my mom, despite everything we went through, one thing she instilled on us was taking care of our mental. She was real big on that, and she might not have known all of the science behind, mental health and all of that, but she always made sure we were all right, upstairs. And that was huge, because I felt like for my siblings and I, we were able to thrive no matter what kind of situation we were in. So, I kind of look at that as an advantage, despite everything. But, growing up in Garfield Court, getting in the mix with everything. I left home when I was like 15, ripping and running with a wild crew. Some who I know probably listening tonight, we kind of raised each other growing up out there without really having fathers in our life. So, the typical story you hear growing up, in any type of project area, low income area, that's kind of, what I lived.
Yo, you said, you know, you said a lot. And what I want to do is because I think it's important, bro. Um and rest in peace to your mom, bro. And I know, that that's still fresh in terms of, your mother's death. And I just want to take some time to talk through that because I met your mother for the first time when we all went to your graduation. And we were out in Kentucky, and I may have met her in passing before then, but that was the time that I really got a chance, to meet her. Um, and you talked about her being someone who kind of like when you started talking about the spiritual piece or the mental
Right.
piece, and she
Yeah.
she always she always stressed that.
Right.
If you can just share what that was like what are the little lessons you learned when you start talking about like how she is stressed, like being mentally in a good space, if you can share a little bit about that.
Right, and I think that's important too, and I also think like that's the greatest gift that anyone could ever bestow on someone. Right, is making sure no matter what you go through, you kind of keep your head on right. So
True.
just thinking about some of the lessons, like no matter what it was, that you know, no matter what situation we went through, whether it was being evicted or anything, like
Mhm.
the next day we pick right back up, right, and kind of leading by example, and my sisters too being a big part of that. But one thing was just pretty much taking advantage of every situation I was in, regardless of if it was a positive or negative situation, like being able to take mistakes or bad
Mm.
situations and think through them, and how I might be able to use what I learned here in the future, right, and just using every situation, being strategic about it, I guess, in a way as to where, we can make anything happen despite our situation, right? Like, and I think
Sure.
too, I feel like that really helped me throughout my life with every decision I make. Right now with everything I do, I think, how can I benefit from this? And not so much in a selfish way, but getting the best out of every situation possible. So I think that was huge. That's just one example. My mom being a single parent, really not having many resources, she still made us believe that she was able to protect us, so we we felt like we was all right, even if she wasn't there. So it was just different ways where I think she made sure that no matter what was going on, we were all right mentally. We didn't have anything, but on Christmas, we always had, what we wanted and things like that. So I think little things like that, went a long way and kind of helping us thrive throughout our lives, me and my siblings.
I love it. I love it, fam. And that's one of the things that I always say. Because growing up, you really, as bad as you may have it, you don't even realize how bad you have it. You know what I'm saying? Like it's one of
Mm,
those things that when you don't have another thing, quote unquote, to judge what you're experiencing,
right,
you think that what you're experiencing is normal. And then when you grow and it's like, damn, man, yo, you start looking back like, damn, mom was really holding it down
right,
because,
right,
as an adult now, I'm like, yo, you was going through this, like, and you ain't had this and you ain't had that. Like, it means a little something different.
right.
So I definitely feel you, on that. And like I said, I wanted to take some time because I think that that's important. And you
Mhm.
talked about your sister, man, like, and a huge shout out, to your sister, who was there too when I got a chance. And you got two sisters, right? Is it
Yep.
two?
I got three
Yeah,
sisters. I
three.
got three
All right.
sisters. Two grew up in the house with me, but I got another sister, Kia, who grew up out in Lakewood, Manchester area
Okay.
too. Yep.
Okay.
Mhm.
Um, and I remember the one sister. I remember the huge role that she played in your life. Your bigger sister.
Yeah.
And that is, and, we may get into that story a little later in terms of, I remember a few key moments, but I remember one key moment of sharing with you and with her. But we'll probably get into that, as we move on, in this story. But I always remember, your big sister looking out for you and being a really, really important part of everything that you did.
Man, like like still to this day, I'm I'm inspired by her and everything that she did. I look back and I still don't understand it. You know, like I said, having a child, having my nephew when she was just 14 and having to become an adult early. And, you know, at that point, you know, everything kind of changed in our lives too, because we had stability. Like before she was 17, 18 years old, she was holding it down and running things in
Yes.
the household.
Yes.
So, you know, I look back
Yes.
now as I can't imagine myself or anybody I really know is 15 years old doing some of those things, you know, and that like I said, still to this day, I'm inspired and you know, she's still doing amazing things. She just moved out here, you know, and that, you know, that was huge for all of us. And she like she just have a life. If they gave a lifetime achievement a lifetime achievement award to everybody who deserved it, she would definitely have one. Like
She
that's
would be
a
up
fact.
there.
Yeah.
Shout her name out, Aulander.
Tawana Willis. Yep, she probably
Yes.
listening tonight.
That's what's up. And like because I'm like I think that those things are important. Put those names out there, giving people because we always talk about give them their roses, you know, while they're alive, and that's a big part of what I want to do too, is giving those shout outs to folks, you know, while they're still with us, man, and celebrating them. You know, we started off by talking about you as a middle school student when I first met you. But one of the things that I would love to talk about, Orlando, is what what kind of student were you? Like thinking back to even if you can go back to elementary school, bro. Like if you could tell us like what kind of student you were, what elementary school, if you can go back there, what elementary school was like, what middle school was like, what high school was like, and forget about athletics, but just thinking about as a student, if you can just share that with us.
Yeah, and I always kind of reflect on my life, and I think about all of this stuff. So I do remember a lot, you know. And forgive me if I get long winded, but I'm gonna try to, you know,
Do it,
cut a
bro.
short
Do it.
story
It's
out
your
of it
night.
all.
It's your
But
night.
but I went to Elbron, and you know, that's kind of a distance away from, you know, our part of Long
Yes.
Branch where we grew up at. But I started kindergarten late because my mom was in the program and I was staying out in Reading, Pennsylvania with my grandmother.
Wow.
And by the time my mom had got back, school had already started. And I guess Gregory School was full at capacity. So,
Okay.
you know, they bust me out to Elbron. And so I went out there until second grade, and then I went to Garfield School, which was a little bit closer to our side of town, before I went to middle school. But as far as the kind of student I was in elementary, you know, I was the typical kid from a low socioeconomic background. You know, really not really knowing why I was in school, not knowing the purpose of being there to learn and understanding some of the supports that were going on. And you know, it's only by the grace of God that I probably wasn't thrown into to special ed, because
Wow.
pretty much everybody who I grew up with and around was put into
Mm-hmm.
special ed, you know, and I really didn't see too much of a difference between, you know, me and those peers. So, you know, I always kind of thought that was, you know, that was strange, but a blessing. But, you know, I got in trouble, you know, I was outside of sports and stuff. Like I did a bunch of some of the knucklehead things, you know, some things that I look back on in elementary school that I did that wasn't super smart, but I really kind of started to make knucklehead decisions once I got into middle school, right? And you know, I started to get around all my friends because we were going to different schools. Some, you know, some of us were going to Anastasia, West End, you know, and most of us were in Garfield. But once we all kind of converged on in middle school, it was
Yes.
it was it was
Yes.
wild. It was a wild time.
Yes.
Yeah, that
Yes.
was. I look back now too, and I just think, wow, man, like some of the stories that me and some of the people I grew up with would have, it's we could really probably make a movie about it. And I say that in the humblest way. You know, I know, you know, our life wasn't any harder than anybody else's, but it's a whole lot of points in our journey as youth that we could point to and just be like, wow. Yeah.
Yo, it's thin lines. And you know, you and I have had many conversations about thin lines between being on in one space or another. And some of the people we love the most ended up on the on the wrong side of those thin lines.
Mm.
And we feel there's a sense of like guilt for like surviving and being like on the other side of the thin line, and so I feel what you're saying in terms of, like, yo, it's so many you went all the way back to just things in terms of being like, all right, there were some of my friends who were sent to special education for whatever
Mm.
reasons. And maybe that began to change their whole path in terms of what expectations people have for them
Right.
in school systems,
Right.
And, when we look at our lives, period, we can look back to certain times where it's like, yo, I was very blessed
Yeah.
for X, Y, and Z. So, that's a shout out. And that's that whole survivor's remorse, that we sometimes have. I know I hold that, bro. Like I have that same kind of feeling. So I appreciate you bringing that up, and being aware of that. Like it's like almost like, yo, you was aware of that back in elementary school. Like there were paths that were kind of set even at that moment, in elementary school. So I appreciate you mentioning that, because I think that's very important, Aulander. I really, and for you to be, like in tune to see that at that age is crazy.
Yeah. No, and that's kind of like that level of, I guess, just consciousness. I kind of always carried with me. Like even before I learned some of the things that I did and was able to do some of the things, that to get me to where I am now. I kind of always had like a keen sense of awareness, right? Like this don't seem right, or like what's going on here? What's the ramifications or implications of what's going on? I was always kind of cognizant of those things, and that's kind of always what I had. And I remember, it's funny because I was just looking back at a report card. Like I said, my sister just moved out here. She brought with her a tub of things that I had, and it was one of my old, maybe middle school or high school report cards. And I was looking at some of the comments that I had, despite the grades I have. I
Yeah, good
graduated high
comments.
school with a 2.6 GPA, but like all the comments were like, were like this, very conscientious student, very deep critical thinker. And I was just like, man, I don't really know where that's coming from with the grades, but just kind of thinking about how I was always kind of aware of some things. I really think that carried me, over.
True.
Yeah.
True. And that's one of the things, because I'm not real big. And here I am, an educator, saying I'm not real big into grades, right? Because grades aren't that important to me. Because I know a lot of times grades don't match who a person and what a person is, whether it's what kind of academic abilities they have, or more importantly, what kind of person they are, right? So even with my own children, I don't stress grades. I stress more, what kind of person are you?
Right.
I stress more, are you a critical thinker? Are you conscious of your feelings and other feelings? Are you comfortable in your own skin? So it's interesting that you bring that up in terms of what grades are versus what grades aren't. Because I know that, you and I have history in terms of, like, I taught you, I had you in class, I think 2 years I had you in class in high school. And I remember one situation where we were taking a final, right? And for a grade, quote unquote. And I think that year may have been your junior year. It may have been your senior. I think it was your junior year. You would probably tell me better. But I remember, like, you missed the final or a midterm. You missed something. Is this jogging a memory for you?
Yeah, I think it's my junior year, because it's funny too, because it was a few things in that box, and I think it was my junior year where I had missed. I had, it was like tardy notices, or like I was like out probably like 30 days in my junior year up until like the midpoint. And I remember I was reading letters, like, so I'm pretty sure I just wasn't there.
You weren't there, bro. And I remember, because I was like, yo, I can fail him, So teachers, because this show is for everybody. Teachers, if you're out there listening, a young man or a young woman misses their final, misses their midterm, don't be so quick to just put a 0 in the book and be like, he's failed. Like, because I remember having a conversation with you,
Yeah.
and I remember creating an alternate assignment for you. And I was like, all right, bro, you missed the regular midterm, but I want you to work. I want you to do X, Y, and Z,
Right.
and giving you another opportunity to fulfill that. Because even at that moment, I was like, it's not about this, asking him about Hamlet or Shakespeare. I was like, it's about something deeper. Um, and you did that, and you submitted to me something that I'll never ever ever forget, bro. I'll never ever ever forget, what you submitted in terms of your assignment. And you really you broke down and went into some things that were so deeper than any question that I could ask you. And it was one of the things, Orlando, that connected me to you even more, in terms of like, yo, first of all, this brother is brilliant. Secondly, he's reflective because he's thinking about everything. He's thinking about his own status, where he is, and how he can self-correct, and how there are environmental things out there that are creating his situation. But then, like, how you was like, yo, I want more, but how do I get it? And I don't know if you recall that.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah, I remember. I'll never forget. I still got that assignment because if you remember, you sent it back to me. And shout out
Yes.
to John. I see John in the comments. He was in that
Yes.
class. He was in that class with me. I remember we
Yes.
used to send it
Yes.
back. But
Yes.
you sent it to me, and I still got it. And and you might not even realize it, and I'm pretty sure you knew it was a deeper meaning at that point. But for all the teachers who are listening, like that was more impactful than you might even think as a teacher in that moment. Like that gave me the opportunity to reflect a little bit more and to kind of get a lot of that down on paper, right?
Yes.
And getting that down on paper, even though at the time I kind of knew, some things I was involved in wasn't right, and
Mm-hmm.
I didn't have the right kind of guidance and all, but I just didn't have the tools yet. But when I
True.
did, when I was kind of sharp enough, I was able to go back to that and be like, look, this is who I've been this whole time. Like
Yes.
there's no confusion. I always wanted more.
Yes.
And so that was big for me, especially when I had first came to Kentucky and I was kind of grinding to get back
Mm-hmm.
on my feet, right? And I was looking back at a lot of stuff like, nah, I came too far. Look at this, kind of looking back at the 16, 17-year-old I was then and thinking, nah, I'm not done yet, So
Word.
um
Word.
yeah, that was big, man. That assignment right there, that did more for me than anything I ever learned in school. Like I was able to learn, like I said, I graduated high school with a 2.6 GPA, and I was never there. So there was a lot of things I had to learn when I got to college on my own. Like my
Yep.
boy Vaughn in the comments now, shout out to him too. We spent 24 hours in the library at times just getting right, But I had to kind of educate myself anyway. But I think if I didn't have those lessons, and those memories
Yeah.
from moments like that, I don't think I would have been able to persevere. So that was sharp.
Bro, it was you laid it all out, and shout out to John's in the comments, who another one of my all-time favorites. Vaughn, who I got a chance to meet up at Kentucky at the graduation and spend some time with him, and at the time was, I don't even know if it was his fiance, but his wife, who is now his wife. We got a chance to share time out there in Kentucky during that time. But I remember, and I was like, yo, I said, you know what? Just list 5 things. I said 5 things. I said 5 things. This is like, teachers, again, this is not in the standards. This is not in, like, okay, the lesson plan. This is me taking a risk. And I was like, yo, give me 5 things that you want to, that are heavy on your mind, or maybe 5 things that you want to accomplish. And then I was like, yo, write me an essay that explains, where you are, but where you want to be. And you did both of those things, fam. And I remember getting them, and I was like eager to read them. And we later sat down and talked about them. I remember it was at a Dunkin' Donuts. We sat down and we brought them back out, and I was like, this was like maybe 2 or 3 years after you wrote them,
Mhm.
and I was like, yo, let's revisit what you wrote. And you went in to explaining that, and we read them together, and that was one of the most powerful moments that I've ever experienced. Forget about as an educator, but as a human being.
Mm.
Yo, so I don't know if you remember that, but
Mhm.
like,
Oh yeah.
bro, that was deep.
Yeah, that was that. Like, and at that point, like I was at kind of a low, you know, and
Yeah.
it was a real tough time for me just all around, you know, like all of my mistakes was kind of coming to a head, you know, and I was just at a place where I was like, yo, I don't really know where to go from here, and I'm not sure if that was. I guess that was maybe yeah. I guess that was after I had kind of got kicked out of high
Yes.
school.
Yes.
Um,
Yes.
so yeah, it was that was at a
Yes.
point in my life where I like that was
Bro,
that
you
was
was
it.
yeah, you were kicked out of high, like, and we didn't even get to that point, because you were kicked before that, before we even had that moment. You had an incident in school with another student, and you were like, you had an incident that you got expelled from high school. And Orlando, I think that these stories are important because sometimes, I work with young people a lot, and we make mistakes as young people. I made mistakes as a young person, and we think that when we make that mistake, it's the end of our lives. We think that, there's no coming back from this. And then what we begin to do is, and not to get too deep, but we engage in this whole sense of nihilism,
Mm-hmm.
or this nihilistic threat in terms of like, there's nothing to live for.
Mm-hmm.
There's I'm just like when you look at Biggie, if you want to know nihilistic threat, think about Biggie Small's album Ready to Die.
Mm-hmm.
That's nihilism. That's nihilistic threat. That's like, whatever happens happens at this point, because you give up on any hope of anything in future. So you're not thinking future self. So when I ask you to write about future self, you're not thinking about that when you're in a moment of nihilism. So young people are failing, and they feel these moments of like, I ain't got nothing to live for. And therefore their actions become that. So I want to go back to that because you were expelled from school, um, and you basically could have given it all up there, at that moment, and I was even a piece of that. Can you just talk about that? Because there may be some young people out there now that are like, they're in that situation of like, I was expelled from school. What do I do next? And that was like the end of your senior year. It may have been like the spring of your senior year. If you could just talk a little bit about that.
Yeah. So, and I definitely too want to go back and say like even those kind of thoughts of like it's no tomorrow for me. Like this is it. There's no future. Like as an educator now on an elementary level, I'm kind of seeing that in younger kids. So I think anybody who's working with even younger youth, like you got to pay attention to that as well. Like, and see it might not manifest itself in the same way as it will in a 17, 18-year-old kid. But, our young kids are thinking like that too. And we got to figure out a way to be a wedge between that, like you did for me as a
Yes.
17, 18-year-old. But yeah, like I said, in high school, I was in the mix. And it's a lot of people who probably listening tonight who like, man, I would never, I guess, and I think too, though, some people can kind of sense that it's a story behind me with just how I operate and move. But so in the mix, fighting, I don't know, maybe selling drugs. I think that particular instant was a fight.
Right.
And
Yes.
it was
Yes.
at that point, I had been involved in fights all throughout my high school career, and that was a pretty bad one. And I remember just getting suspended, right? Like I'm thinking this is a 10-day suspension, just like the typical one. And anytime before that, I think I don't want to say sports saved me. I can never go back and say what it was. That could have been just the last straw, and it happened to be after my last football game in high school.
Yes.
But before that, I was always kind of protected. Like getting suspended and still playing. And shout out. That's no slight against any of the adults who were allowing that kind of stuff to go on. I think they were trying to make the best out of whatever it is. I'm not going to cast no
True.
aspersions right now.
True.
But at that point, I thought I was just suspended. I remember coming back into the school and they asked me to bring my sister with me, who was my guardian at the time. And I remember getting in there and being in that office and just kind of hearing about some of the things that I had been involved in since I had been in high school. And it was like, yo, we can't let you come back. We can't let you come back here. And that was, when I mean to tell you, that was kind of the first time where a consequence really like hit me. Before then, no matter what it was, like, even getting wrapped up in things and going to court and being on probation and all of that as a high school kid, like nothing really hit home like when I got kicked out of high school.
Yes.
Like it's like, and at that point, like I was getting letters from every college in the country.
Yes.
Like I was just
Virginia.
looking through my
I
letters.
remember. Yes.
Yeah. Like I'm like this. Every school in every Power 5 school in the country.
Yes.
was writing me at that time, and I was trying to make a decision as to if I was going to go to Temple. I think with Dip and Brad.
Yes.
Yep. And then I was like, I know that was a done deal. But shout out to Coach George, because he, despite all of that, he still made sure that I got into Montclair, which I went to for a short period of time before I left. Still not really realizing the opportunity I had, but he was there for me the following year too, and helped me get into Wesley down in Delaware as well, and also. But at that moment, when you talk about nihilistic thoughts, like when I got kicked out of school, like at that point I was on my own. I was. There was no adult in my life really. My sister had her own kids and things she was going on. She couldn't control an 18-year-old man. So I got into a whole lot like at that when I was like I'm a huge advocate of keeping kids in school and keeping kids as busy as possible, because like the elements that I kind of got involved in once I got kicked out of school, it was a completely different animal. Like, I was like,
true.
It was
new,
kind of
Aulander.
wild,
it was new. It was new.
It was some real things going on.
True. And you talked about school connectedness and keeping young people connected to school. You had gone through, at that point, 4 years of, let's call it what it is. You had gone through 4 years of eligibility to play sports. And it's fair to say, if you had a 5th year eligibility, maybe things would have been a little different in terms of like, do we separate from Orlando or not? And I remember I was even in that room. Like there's many rooms that I've been in, and I was a teacher in that room and not even realizing what room I was in. And you and I have had that conversation, after the fact, in terms of like, yo, I didn't even realize the magnitude of that situation that we were in. And I'll never forget sitting in there, and salute to your sister. In that, because she was advocating for you. And you talked about like, yo, after that moment, and I left the school, and it was like, what else do I do? And where do I go? And we start talking about nihilistic threats, or like, yo, it's nothing else to live for, because now, can I get to college? Can I do this? Can I do that? They don't care about me no more. Because you start saying, well, the school don't care about me because they just kicked me out, but they use me to play sports for this amount of years. So you start developing these things in your mind, like, yo, what, what's next? And I'll never forget that day for me personally. I'll never forget, being there. And I'm happy that I was, because it created something in me to understand, like, yo, how do I reconnect, with, in this case, with you? And there was another young man who I did the same. And it was like, how do I reconnect with them? And how do I now try to help them and to assist them? So you sharing that story, bro, because there's people right now who are going through very, very similar things. There's guardians and parents who are who may not know, what do I do in this situation? Or, do I just take it? Do I ask questions, or so on and so forth? So I really appreciate you sharing that. And you left and you talked about Coach George, and shout out to Coach George, who gave me an opportunity to coach as a young man, young teacher or whatever. And you said that he was someone who stayed in your corner, and someone who made sure, all right, you're gonna get the Montclair, and you ended up at Wesleyan. Like, how did that feel, bro, when you was like dismissed from the school, quote unquote, but still having that kind of connection with someone like a Coach George?
That was huge, and like I felt like kind of early on, even as a freshman, Coach George he saw something in me, and I think he kind of realized that I didn't have the support needed, for my potential. So there was a few times where I this box that I got letters that I didn't even open. I'm talking about
Wow.
U.S. Army All-American combines to compete for the game, Nike camps, and stuff that I at the time, like I said, there was no support system at home who was ready for all of that. So I didn't know what to do. But a lot of times stuff was coming to the high school, and I think Coach George was seeing it and was like, nah, I gotta be some support for him. So, I remember, stopping by his house,
Yes.
he would make sure I would have the money for,
Yes.
for different type of camps
Yes.
and different type of things so that I can get to. But, once I got kicked out, he made sure that I wasn't going to lose all my opportunities. And that felt good, because at that point, it was a lot of people were giving up on me, right? Like, it was, you started to see what the type of things I was involved in. And it was like, I don't know. And even like I said, even as an educator now, I'll have to remind myself, like, hold on, like this young brother right here, this young sister right here this ain't it for her. Like it's much greater purpose beyond what's happening now and some of the things we see. But I think at that time, like, it was people like you, and Coach George and a few others who were like, we're not going to give up on this brother. And I can't tell you, with all the mistakes I made, I can't tell you how much I appreciate like that level of support from Coach George at that point. And then you talk about being in so many rooms, like even before that, like your class, I think, was an AP class, and you fought for me to get into that. When I really didn't have any merit to prove it, other than like, what I was like in the conversation.
Yes.
But that, and then like, in every point of my life, like, you were somebody who was consistent there. So, I think that was huge, and that's like that support right there. And I think your research kind of talks about like mentoring on that level, like that culturally responsive mentoring, and the impact like that has. That's critical.
Word, bro. And it definitely does. And that's what drove me, because I was always like, yo, I just want to be the coach. I want to be the teacher that I always needed. Right. So a big part of what I did was that, so whenever I was amongst you and all of y'all, like I saw Thomas in the comments, Miggs in the comments, like, having the opportunity to teach y'all. I was on a call earlier today with someone, and I was like, yo, I look, this is before I had children of my own, and I looked at them as like, yo, these are my kids. And I want to make sure that they have the best possible life that I can, impact, in whatever ways I can impact. I want to make sure they have the best possible life. So that's how I looked at things. And I'm an underdog dude. So whenever I see somebody that's like, yo, they on the bottom, they struggling, like that's where I'm going to be attracted to. That's where I'm going to move to. And your situation, Orlando, like real talk, like that's what gave me the confidence within the system. Okay. Because when we talk about this whole thing, we talk about systems, we talk about outside of systems, right? I feel like, and shout out to Coach George, because you mentioned Coach George a lot. Coach George even giving me an opportunity to be a football coach. I was no football expert, but when he gave me an opportunity to be a football coach, because I feel like he realized the importance of having people who understood system and people who understood the outside of systems and how we live and survive on the outside of systems. And that's what I was able to bring to the coaching staff.
Right.
And meeting you and having all of that time with you and many other brothers, it really opened up a lot of opportunities for mentorship.
Yeah.
And that is what all of my research has been about, is mentorship. So you're right. That was a big part. And even when I asked you to write about your future self, it was about, that's mentorship. It's like, where do you see yourself in the future?
Right.
And that was what we went through. So I appreciate you for acknowledging that, but more importantly, I just appreciate you for having the courage, to move through that situation. So if you don't mind, Aulander, I would love to talk about you moving from a piece of being removed from school, but then still finding school in your future. like you were removed from school, but you still managed to find school in your future.
Yeah.
You talked about Coach George being a pivotal part of that. But if you could just share that, like, of how you continued, how you perspired through that whole situation, continue.
Yeah, for sure. But before I get into anything, I think it's definitely important to, like, you talk about giving everybody their flowers. Like, when I think about my journey, it's so many people who can look at parts of my journey and kind of, I guess, like, take ownership of it and be like, hold on, like, I was there for that. Like, I was a big part of helping you through that. Like, it's so many people who I can point to, and who I won't be able to name tonight because it's so many, but I definitely want to give a big shout out to all of my brothers who I grew up with. Like, you talk about some of the brothers who you helped at the same time, like, the crew that I came up with. Like I said, we raised each other, and we had to be savvy, and just kind of learn how to work through situations. So big shout out to all everybody who I grew up with, and anybody who kind of I crossed paths with throughout my journey, especially at that time. So and shout out to Thomas. Thomas came out here when for my graduation and my wedding. That's my brother for life. He was always somebody who you talk about keeping a positive mindset. Like, T Money was always that. So big shout out to him and everybody else too in the comments, Miggs and anybody else who I might have missed. But throughout that time, like, Rawls, I tell you, like, you talk about confusion. Like, that was big. That was big at that point because school, I had never taken school serious. Like, it was teachers like you and a few others who always told me that I had a lot of potential as far as academics. I got a good score on my SAT, so I'm like, I might be a smart brother at all, but I'm like, school is not for me. But I didn't want to give up that opportunity to play football. I'm like, I still, like, I didn't want to be a somebody who just wasted out. Long Branch is notorious for having talent and and really not capitalizing on that. So I didn't want to lose that, but I was knee deep in the streets too at the time. And really looking at my life and and all the obstacles that I went through, and I'm like, there's no way that I'm gonna be able to thrive in a college campus. So I remember Coach George saying, like, we're gonna get you somewhere. The D1 schools might fall back now with everything going on, but we're gonna get you somewhere. And I remember applying to some of the schools who were interested in me to play football and not getting accepted, I guess based on my GPA, or it might have been just like where my, articulation skills were as far as writing at that time and taking care of the admissions process. But they let me in on a special permit to play football. I think like the Division III schools get like 3 of those a year or whatever that they get to like admit anyway. So I went there, and I wasn't on that campus for more than 3 days, where I was like, nah, this lifestyle not for me. This not for me. So I did something stupid when I was there and ended up leaving. I remember I left like in the middle of the night during camp.
I remember.
I think John might have been the one that came and
He picked you up. He picked you up.
I left, and Darrell Sapp was at Montclair at the time. I think he might have been in his junior, senior year. And I remember, like, even before then, when I got there, he kind of set me up. He, like, gave me his room. He was staying, he had, like, an apartment off campus.
Wow.
So I'm like, man, as a freshman, I'm walking in here, you know, I got my own spot. You know, like, Sapp was a big deal around there. So, you know, I had some clout just off of his back. And I left. But I remember he called me, like, yo, Coach G, that was the head coach at the time, was like, yeah, you know, you left and everything. He won't say nothing if you back up here and move back in and at practice by tomorrow morning. So I went back up there. I'm like, you know, I can't give up this opportunity. I went back up there the next day. I was at practice, and I remember one of the assistant coaches had a lot to say, like a lot of slick stuff about me thinking I was a superstar. And I'm like, I wasn't used to that. You know, I was always used to being like kind of getting away with doing whatever I wanted. So I was like, man, I'm not beat for this. I'm out of here. And I left again after that practice. And I went back to Long Branch, was in Long Branch, getting involved in some more things that I shouldn't have been. And then I ended up the next year around, like needing to get out of Long Branch. Like, I got to get out of here. And Coach George was like, it's still interest for you. I think Johnny and Manny at that time was transferring from their schools to Wesley. And at that time, Wesley was a big deal. It was like the number 2 D3 school in the country.
Well, sending kids to D1 after. Yes. So
I remember it was always NFL scouts at every practice thing. Like, it was a couple people who went on to the NFL that was at Wesley with us. So I remember thinking, like, all right, I done blew an opportunity. I'm not blowing this one. So I went down to Wesley the next year. And that was a different experience because I stayed the whole time. And that was like my first time being away from Long Branch. Right. And shout out to Reese Turpin. He probably not on here tonight, but he was down there cool at the time. And you know, he made sure I was good, you know, had everything I needed to. Shout out to Johnny and Manny too, who was support as well. But I ended up staying down there for a year. But I was messing up. Like, I wasn't mature enough. I still ain't had that maturity level. I still didn't know what it took to be successful. Right. So I was still kind of messing up. Although at that point I knew I couldn't get into trouble. I'm like, I'm staying out of trouble, not doing it. I was too smart for that. Right. But as far as the work ethic and like really, really focusing on school and taking that serious, I wasn't there yet. So, you know, I couldn't come back the following year. And that's when I was like, all right, I got to figure something out. And I came out here, I think just to get a job for a little bit, just to work and try to get back in. And I was real connected to you at that time. You know, you were guiding me through that time on not only on a mentor level, but like on a spiritual level as well. Like, I remember at that point in time, like reading different books. Like, that's when I first started reading and learning about like how this world really works. Like, and getting deep and working on myself, like learning, you know, like really getting knowledge of self. Like, that's when I really started to kind of figure out like, hold on, I haven't been putting the right kind of energy into the world. I've been selfish. I've been, you know, living for myself. Like, my whole perspective started to change. And I think that's what that maturity, like I started to realize like, all right, this person who I always wanted to be was here. Like, it's just, like I'm disciplining myself and learning and putting some tools in my toolbox to kind of, you know, get through the water, navigate through the waters, right? So I remember I had applied to Delaware State, right, which is also in Dover, the same city Wesley's in. And I was dating a girl at the time who was still at Wesley, and I was like, I'm coming home.
I remember, bro.
Right. Yep. I'm like, I'm going to Del State. Like, I have an apartment set up and everything. To come back, and I'm like, there's no way in the world. And I think my brother-in-law Fox might be on here. I think I saw him. Shout out to him.
Yes, he was on. Yeah,
I was talking to him a lot at that time, and he was, you know, between you and him, like having some men in my life who was like not only trying to do the right thing, but like really putting the right kind of energy into me at that time like I needed that, and seeing two men move like that was
Yes.
was real important. Was real important for me, right? Like I'm like, oh, this is it right here. This is what it's about.
Yes.
And I remember just like I'm like, you know what? Let me apply to the University of Kentucky real quick. I'm like, right now I'm hot. Like I should hit the lottery.
Like, why not?
Right, right.
Yo,
And
why
it was
not?
past the deadline and everything. And I remember calling like, hey, can I send in an application even though it's past the deadline? And the lady on the phone, she had told me, she was like, yeah, don't send in the application fee yet. Just send in the application. And I'm like, oh, is this free? I'm gonna send it in anyway.
Yeah.
And just kind of getting antsy. I remember calling like 2 days later. I called the diversity department and was like, hey, yeah, I just filled out an application. I was kind of talking about some of the things I wanted to do, and kind of talking about like, hey, y'all might see my transcript and all of this, but don't let this deter you. I'm hungry right now. And the guy I was on the phone with, his name is Buzz Burnham. I ended up running into him later on, and it all. And he was like, I'm actually about to go into a meeting right now, and we're about to discuss some of the applicants. He like asked me what was my name. He was like, I'm gonna make sure we discuss yours. I'm gonna get back to you tomorrow. He called me back like 30 minutes later, like, I was able to get you in, and we're gonna get you in on this scholarship. It was a William C. Parker scholarship for minorities. And I'm like, yo, what? I'm like, so I just went from not really having no opportunities. I'm out here, down on my last, just trying to make it back. And that, and at that point, I'm like, I can either go back home and go to Delaware State, have a fresh start, or have a fresh start here at the University of Kentucky. And I remember calling you. I remember, look, at that point in time, I was taking a bus to work and walking back. And I remember thinking like, yo, this is this ain't it. And I remember talking to you like, hey, what would you do with these opportunities? We kind of had to talk about some of the pros and cons and stuff.
Yep. Orlando, I remember it all, bro. And shout out Thomas T. Ellis. Yo, shout out. You talk about manifest God. You 100% correct. I think it was Wesleyan. You had called me. It was something with a car, bro. Something happened with a car. A car broke down.
I hit somebody, I think.
Yes.
Or I ran.
Something crazy happened. Yes. And you was like, I don't know what to do. Like, and I was like, because it was like a lot of things happening right at that breaking point. And I'm saying all of this to say this, young people, when you think everything is falling apart, things can't get no worse. It can also be the breaking point. It can also be the point where you're breaking through a situation. Because I remember on that call with you, I was in my daughter didn't even have, we didn't have furniture in my daughter's room at that point. I was sitting in an empty room talking to you, and you had brought up this whole thing with a car, and then you had to make a decision. Are you going to leave? Are you going to stay here? Are you going to play football? And I'll never forget that. And at that point, Orlando, and I never shared this with you, but I was even learning myself. I was learning mentorship. I didn't know what it meant to be a mentor. I didn't know what it meant to give advice. You know what I'm saying? So it was like, I'm trying to be like, yo, if this was my son, what would I say?
Right.
And I remember that. And then I also remember, and I was like, yo, don't feel like you have to go back there. And then the whole car thing, we had a whole conversation about that, what you should do. But then it was like, it got to the point, and I'll never forget when you called me with the Kentucky thing. He was like, yo, I just got, and I'll never forget, that was a new high school. We just moved into the high school, and you called me, and I went into an empty room in a new high school that's there now. And I was like, and you were telling me I got accepted. And you were like, what should I do? And I was like, bro, like, you got to get out. Like, this is it. You know what I'm saying? Like, and I'll never forget that. So that had to be, what was that? 08? Maybe
that
you
was
moved.
2000, late 2000, the end of 2009. The end of
2009. Okay.
Yep.
All right.
Yep.
Yes. And you went out, but I remember all of that, and I know a lot of folks been putting up tonight. It's been a village. You shouted out Fred Clark, the white, Freddie Fox, shout out to him. Thomas Ellis, and then when you got out there, you ran into folks like Vaughn, which are these things are very, very important, and shout out to T. Ellis. But you make that decision to head out to Kentucky. I know that couldn't have been easy. That had to be a hard decision for you to make at that point.
That was wild, man. I'll never forget. I'll never forget that moment, right? Because that was crucial, and
Mm-hmm.
you know, and at that point in my life, I really had to face the decision of whether or not I was going to get comfortable being uncomfortable, right? Like,
Yeah.
you know, back home is home, you know, and that was like, it's nothing like it. And even Delaware, which is a little bit different than Jersey, that was still home. Like, it
True.
was close enough to where I'm like, that's it. I didn't know anybody out here outside of my sister and Fred. So, you know, I didn't really know anybody. And that was I had an apartment already to go back to in Dover, Delaware.
Yeah.
Like it was, I had a whole life, you know,
Yeah.
that I had, and like I really, I thought about my year at Wesley the year before then, right, and how it was so hard to avoid some of the elements from back home. Like
Mm-hmm. Yep.
people know you, people know, you know, they heard of where you're from, and you know, and it's like
Yes. Yes.
it's hard to escape. It was hard to escape, and I'm like, even though I was much more mature at that point, like I was rap tight, and you know, my decision making was on another level. I was still like, all right, I'm not going to risk this opportunity here. I'm like, I'm not going to,
Mhm.
like, I'm gonna take the safe bet. Like, you know, forget what the schools are like. Like, yeah, I have an opportunity to go to HBCU,
Right.
and I turned that down. Like, that was a tough decision to make. Like, even like just on a school level, and, you know, so that was a real tough pill to swallow. With you know, saying to myself like, all right, I'm gonna go to the University of Kentucky out here where I don't know nobody. You know, the campus, you know, don't really look nothing like me. I don't know if I'm gonna be all right out here. Um, but it was the decision I think I couldn't turn down, and I at least had to
Mm-hmm.
try out. Um, and I was so hungry at that point in my life to be successful in it, like find some kind of
Yes.
purpose that, you know, I was like, you know, I don't need no support. Like
Yes.
I'm gonna be all right.
I'm gonna do it.
Yeah,
I'm gonna make it.
right,
And that's one of Orlando. That's one of the dilemmas coming up. And whether you want to call it urban environments, inner city environments, whether you want to call it the hood, whatever you want to call it, right? There's this love relationship
yeah,
because when we come up, there's all love there. We feel love in those spaces. But then we also begin to be like, all right, maybe there's more out there. Maybe there's something else out there. And we feel guilty for pursuing that other
mm,
thing. You know what I'm saying? Like we feel like, am I turning my back on
right,
my hood? Am I
yeah,
turning my back? But then the real hood bros, right? They always have a way of being like, yo, we want more for you.
right,
Like this is what you are trying to accomplish. We're gonna make sure we aligning you to be
yeah,
able to accomplish
yes,
those things. You know what I'm saying?
yeah. Oh,
Like in real recognize that.
right. And I was just gonna say, well, it's a few of my brothers too who I grew up with who always been there. Like even, you know, and reconnecting more with like Paul and Dizzy when I
Mm-hmm.
went back home, and like those two
Yes.
people who always kind of was like, yeah, that's what's it. That
Yes.
or that's it right there. And just having
Yes.
people in general who were like,
Yes.
yeah, nah, and I want to like last season I think you had Rob Green on here, right? And
True.
you
True.
know he was somebody too. Like that episode was big. Like I watched that whole episode, and that was big for me. Shout out to Rob. You know what he's
Word.
doing some amazing things, and
Word.
his story is one that you know is super impactful. And I hope a lot of young brothers is listening to
Yes.
him and you know following his footsteps and just listen to what that brother got to say. But he was somebody too who even you know while I was running around, I always knew that you know, he wanted like people like him always wanted something more for kids
Yes.
like me, despite it
Yep.
all. So,
Yep.
you know, it was
Yep.
always people out there
Yep.
in the mix who, you know, and you mentioned earlier somebody put in the comments about it taking a village, like that's the village.
Yo, that is the village, man. And that's why like even having a brother like Rob on, because I'm like, yo, people need to understand.
Yeah.
And it's crazy. You know what? Here a crazy story. Rob's episode, he brought up a story about me that I didn't even remember. And I was like, yo, you remember that? And it's like, yo, that helped shape me.
Right.
And I'm like, damn. And you started off like, yo, I'm from Garfield Court. And if somebody interviewed me, bro, I would say I'm from Garfield Court. Like, so, you know, and when Rob was like, yo, in Garfield Court, you did X, Y, and Z. And I never forgot that. So I'm like, there's a history, there's a collection of stories from our neighborhoods where we grew up, the people we love, that sometimes are put to the side, sometimes they're not acknowledged. But they're important stories, yo. So shout out, you know, to all of them folks, man, because I know at the end of the day, I'm standing on their shoulders. There's so many people I can name of like where they were like, yo, you better not be out here. You better not be doing this. You better not, you know what I'm saying? Like it's a lot of older, you know, older bros. And that was like, yo, this ain't for you, you know? And I think sometimes when people paint the story, they try to paint the story from outside of how we grew up. They don't know that part. They don't know that it was crazy love there. And there were people who saw something in us that was like, yo, it's more for you. Like this ain't it. You know what I'm saying? Like that gets left out a lot of times, and they make it seem like it's this crazy place where no one can survive and all, you know what I'm saying? Like, in all of these things.
Not right. I think when you really in those situations, like that's all anybody want. Like when you truly up there growing in with the struggle, like that's all any of us really truly want. I think it's the, you know, the narrative that gets painted, and some of the people who probably really didn't struggle in it all, you know, painting a bad picture on it all. But the true people who you know, who went through it all despite what they may have had going on, they never wanted that for the youngest coming up underneath them.
True.
You know what I mean? Like
Word.
that was we had to we really had to fight to do some of the things we did, because the older kids were like, nah, like y'all, like too much talent, like right. So we had to fight for our spot.
Yes, they wanted to come. You know, they wanted to come to the games and see y'all play well. They wanted to make sure y'all was doing well in school. They wanted y'all to have the best. I'll never forget that. Like, I'll never forget even being a coach, like, and being in, you know, after the games, like, yo, make sure he doing this, make sure he doing that. And these are people who never took SATs, never went to college, and they like, yo, his SATs, right? His core class. I'm like, yo, y'all know about core classes? Like, they was like, all of this. So there was a level that's love, because they were thinking about your future self. They were not just you, but all of y'all. They was thinking about that, yo. So I think that, you know, that's very important. So what I want to hit on next, Aulander, is that you end up at the University of Kentucky. You go out, and if you don't mind just sharing a little bit about your experiences, you know, when you're out there, you know, some of the challenges, some of the triumphs.
Yeah, man, I like this, and when I talk about me being incredibly blessed, like I like the experiences that I've had since I've been in school is it's been amazing. Like I would have never imagined being able to have some of the experiences and do some of the things I've done, especially with where I was right before I came here. But so I got into school, and at that point, like I was, you know, I didn't have anybody doing my paperwork for me, my admissions paperwork. I was figuring all of that out on my own, right? And I remember a few years before that trying to do that on my own, and it was like, nah, man, I can't fill out no FAFSA. I don't know this information. I can't do none of that. But even when I got to Kentucky, I still didn't. But I'm like, man, I'm gonna figure it out. I'm gonna put something on this paper, and if a red flag come up, I'll answer for it later. You know, I'm just gonna go ahead and do it, right? And through the process of doing that all and have to answer certain questions, I started to learn the process more. So with it all, whether it's financial aid, whether it's you know, my degree track and program, trying to figure out what courses I need to take, when I'm going to take them, how many hours to take, like my room and board situation, how I'm going to eat and live, like, you know, am I going to take loans out, all of that. Like I had to like kind of learn as a real young adult and learn like, okay, I got to be responsible. I got to manage my time, manage my money. I'm gonna have to get a job, do work study, and do all of that. And that was tough. That was real tough. But I will say that, like I said, like I wasn't going to give up. I wasn't going to let another opportunity slip through my hands. Like I was so focused on on being successful, and I was so awake at that time to like, all right, here's my potential. I know what's right. I was my faith was building at that time, right? I just become a Christian like probably like 2 weeks after I had enrolled at the University of Kentucky. So I was learning a lot about myself spiritually, about my purpose and my calling, and what I'm supposed to do here. And so I was driven. I was on fire too at that time.
Yes, I
And,
remember
and
that. I remember that.
I want to, I definitely want to say anybody who's like in a mix where you might be in a situation where it's tough, and you can't see that light at the end of the path. Like it's like trucking along. It's easier said than done, but like see what you got in front of you. Keep pushing and see what tomorrow might hold, and really just try to do one thing at a time. But I guess to backtrack a little bit, like getting organized. It was just little skills where I had to learn that I didn't have before that was gonna help me be successful. Like give myself a calendar and saying like, all right, this is what I'm doing today. This is what I'm going to do tomorrow, just to make sure that I can accomplish these goals I have for myself. Like I'm gonna write these goals out, and this is the steps that I'm going to take to make sure that I accomplish them. And like as long as I could see, like every day, I'd be like, okay, let me X this off my calendar. I did this. Like I felt good. I felt good knowing, even though I wasn't where I was. Like I felt good knowing, like, okay, I called the DMV to get this license situation taken care of. That's out of the way. All right, now on to the next task. Like just kind of step by step, like tackling hurdles to get to where I was. You said a car situation. It was a few car situations. I remember like I had lost my license. I think I had like a warrant in Delaware that I had to take care of. It was a bunch of different things that I'm like, I had to take care of. And like, I just, even though that hill was high, like I just kept kind of chucking at it every bit of the way. But I think,
you did chuck at it, and I'm happy that you talked about that, Aulander, and because I think that people also need to see that there is steps, and it doesn't happen immediately.
right,
None of this, bro.
right,
None of this.
right.
I went back to remembering you from meeting you when you were in 7th grade, right?
Right.
And when I saw you then, I saw greatness in you, but other people may not have,
Right.
And I say that to say this is that there's times in our lives where we think that, I'm not even adequate. I'm not even enough. I'm not, why me? Like, I'm just like the ordinary. I'm just, and I don't deserve more. And we give up, and I think that that's one of the most powerful things about your story, Aulander, is that you didn't give up. And our connection is, I owe you, because you were like the first person that I believed in as a young person. And I'm like, I believe in this kid. And you just did your thing. And that is what, because sometimes as adults, we can get down and be like, it don't even make no difference, like what I say, what I do. And it was like your ability to navigate, I'm not even gonna call it success, because I don't like that word success, but your ability to navigate through different situations was like, all right, there's a thing here. Like there's a role I can play to help and to support, and I think that that's important, bro. Like I think, because a lot of times people like you give up, but then people who are outside of you give up, and they say it's not, there's nothing that can come of that. So I think that that's, I think that that's important to speak on, and to talk on, what you have tonight. But I think that those are really, really important journeys, man, in terms of when people are not so-called, quote unquote, believing, or when you're not even believing.
And that's, I think, too, just kind of thinking of my role now, like, being outside of the classroom and being able to take more of a bigger role in education in my school and district and on a state level as well, with some of the work that I'm doing now. It's just kind of crazy to see like both ends of the spectrum, and being able to be in a role where I kind of have, I don't want to say power, but like when it comes to
You
working
do.
with kids, like, it's, a lot of that, like, it depends on like my role and what I'm doing, just like you said. And
Mhm.
I'm very conscious of that. And I think that's impactful. Like and, I always like wished outside of my family was somebody who could kind of see, my life up into went to college and now, right? Like I said, I came into the show and I said that I graduated high school with a 2.6 GPA. Well, I graduated undergraduate. I got a bachelor's degree with over a 3.0 GPA, and then I got my master's with a 4.0 GPA.
From
So,
where though? From where? From
so
where?
from the University of Kentucky. So I got
See, and stop right there.
yeah.
Stop right there because and I don't like to be like, yo, you graduated from the University of Kentucky. Like I was there. I was up in the Raptors, bro. I was so high up. And I've never been to Rupp Arena, right? To see a basketball game or whatever. But I was so high up and I'm like, yo, this brother is graduating from the University of Kentucky. Like, and I know you just glossed past that, but at the end of the day, like that's big. That's big, bro.
Yeah.
And
No.
and and Thomas was there. I know Tom, T. Ellis was there. He in the chat, like, yo, I was there. I was there. Yo, and and I shared that picture with me, you and your wife and my wife, and I'm like, yo, we were there to see this culmination. So I think that's important. Like, and that's why I'm not letting you just kind of like go past that. Like, yo, you through all of this, that's something that you did. That's something that you accomplished. And I think it's important that people understand, the full circle, as someone mentioned here earlier, of that journey.
Yeah, like and it's for me, I always try to be humble about it, right? And like that's why I'm always giving credit for my journey. Even when I look back on my journey, I see so many people who supported me and fought for me. But that's something like on that day, it was a proud moment for me too. Especially knowing where I was and then kind of seeing what I was capable of. Like
Mhm.
I double majored, and graduated in 4 years with a degree in political science and education. So that was big for me. I'm like, I proved to myself, that was
Yes.
big and proving to myself that I could do anything, no matter what I had been through, no matter what my upbringing was, no matter how limited anything was, even my vocabulary,
Mhm.
like that. Like I was still able to learn all of that, and graduate towards the top of my class and go on beyond that and do some great things. So like if anything, I just wish that my story would help somebody else with a similar track, even somebody who probably didn't have some of the struggles that I had growing up. Like you find yourself in a rut, like that's not it, right? Like, and it really comes back to, I feel like it came back to the energy that I was putting in the world, and then like what I
Hmm.
wanted for myself, right? Like it's like I had to understand the difference between better in self but not being selfish, right? Like that's and
Wow.
that's a it's a
Wow.
that's a fine line between the two of those. So once I really kind of
That's
found the
deep.
purpose, like it was like, okay, like like this is the joy of life. Like it at that point it kind of became habit and all. I don't want to say easy because it's never easy, right? Like it's always hard, but I'm like, this is my path, you know. Um,
That's deep, yo. That is what you just said. I think is really important, and I think is complex. One of the things, Orlando, that I like to ask, folks who are on the show is if you can like identify a space and time where it was like, yo, you was ready to give it all up and you were ready to basically be like, yo, this ain't it. It's over. If you could talk about that and then even talk about more importantly, what it was that got you off the mat, like what it was that was like, all right, it's more to life, even when it wasn't easy to see, like what it was. But if you can just talk about that, because I'm always I need those stories because I still work with, just like you work with young people, I still work with young people. And it's always important to share those stories, so young people can learn. So if you can share a little bit about that, like when it was a time when it was like, yo, this is it, I'm done. But then what it was that got you off the mat.
Yeah, it was several times, honestly, where I was like, this is the end of the road for trying for me. Like,
Mm,
yeah, this ain't it. I'm spinning my wheels. Um, if I could point to a time where I was really like, this is it, it was right before I came out here.
mhm,
I was and I had made a little post, a little like I was off of Facebook for years and years, and then once the pandemic hit, and I had to start working from home and had to use some of the platforms. I'm like, let me jump back on there. And I had
true.
made a little post. And then I mentioned like sleeping on my sister's couch, being dead broke, not
Wow.
having nothing, like no opportunities, no job, no nothing. And at that point, I was 18, maybe 19, about to turn 19, maybe I don't know, somewhere around there. And I was like, this is it. This is it for me. But I think too, though, and I guess going back to my mom and what she left all of us with, like, persevering and being able to still like get up the
Mm,
next day and like pull up my bootstraps and pull up my sleeves and say, we still gotta we gotta get to work. I can't mope around. Because at the end of the day, that's not going to help anything. And I also like, because that the way my mom always made sure we were on top of our mental health and being okay. Like I always knew that having that kind of outlook was going to make my situation worse. Like I don't want to feel depressed. Like, so I
yes.
kind of got to lie to myself and say that everything is all right. Like,
Yes.
it's going to be
Yes.
all right. It's going to be all right. It's going to be all right. I got a plan. Like, I had to tell myself that consistently in order to get out of, um, or at least to see the light at the end of the tunnel. And like I said, my faith kind of helped with that as well. It was moments in my life where I felt like God had got me out of situations, and I'm like, surely if He got me to this point, like it has to be more to it, right? Um, but
Yep.
I
Yep.
think I think too though, really just work like I always being in Long Branch too, and how where the projects is located so close to the beach, and seeing Pier Village, seeing so much money and just seeing wealth, I guess. I always wanted to know what life would be like not having a struggle.
Mm.
Not to say that I'm good right now or
Yeah.
anything like
No, I
that,
feel you. I
but
feel
but
you. I
I
feel
always
you.
wanted to know what it was like outside of the projects, right? Outside of living like every day is the last almost, like like we're not really having a plan and goals going forward. So I guess that drive, and also my siblings, right? Like just seeing how driven they always been, to make things happen. I remember, all my sisters working while they were in high school, and my brother working too. And I'm thinking, man, I could never work as hard as them, you know. And then thinking like, hold on, I got to do more. So, I guess holding on to a lot of the lessons that I learned throughout the way about persevering, and being driven to want more, I guess.
Yo, man. Aulander, like, shout out. I mean, your big sis is on, like, people coming through. Shout out Twana, tuning in, who played a major part in your life, man. A very important part of your life. That's your sister. You know what I'm saying? Like, shout out to Rob, shout out to John, shout out to Thomas. Rob Green just hopped on. And Rob is like, yo, this sometimes people don't even know. Like in that's the important piece. He talked about, and that's what we called it, the jungle. Like that's where
Mm-hmm.
we came from. We all came from, we emerged from there.
Right.
Um, and what you just shared, man, is deep, bro, because you and I can tell throughout this whole episode, Orlando, you've been trying to fit everybody in, and you've been trying to make sure, like, yo, I
Because
don't want to leave here without
what
mentioning people.
right, because I think like it's like when your story is like my journey, there's no way that I could really sit here and pretty much say that I did all of this, right? Like, nah,
Mhm.
this is just pretty much a concoction of all of my experiences and lessons that I learned from everybody who I crossed paths with. Like it was, I try to take meaning out of everything, and I think that's also what kind of helped me get to where I am today. Is like no matter what it is, like what can I learn from this? So I remember all those moments where people impacted my life. So it would be fake or spurious of me to sit here and not, give everybody their proper respect.
And I think that is a testament to who you are. That's a testament to those who were around you, who supported your journey, whether how small they may think it may have been. Like I didn't play that major role, but I believe I'm from a background that I believe every little piece means a lot.
Yeah.
And seeing the feedback that you're getting, bro. Seeing the people who are on this saying like, yo, love, support, like salute, like it's I'm not surprised, Aulander. I'm really not. And I think that this is a piece that we sometimes forget, and you are someone who are out there, you're doing your thing, you educate. Like we haven't even, like when I always say, like sometimes I get on with people and I'm like, yo, bro or sister, you need 2 episodes. I'm just telling you right now, like 1 episode ain't gonna do it. Like we haven't even gotten into with you, like the next stage of your life.
Yeah.
Like we we haven't even gotten to that point. Like we haven't even got to the point of like, yo, what you're doing, like how you're changing lives now in working with young people.
Yeah. That is a whole. We'll be here for a whole, because over the last couple of years, I've been able to do some amazing things. Just like I said, on my school level, district and state level. So like that's. I don't want to keep it. We already been here long, but like, yeah, it's like I said, I'm incredibly blessed to be in a position that I am right now, and to kind of have the impact that I'm able to have right now. It's like I'm speechless about it, for real.
Bro, I remember talking to you, right? And we were like, there was a book we were both reading, and I didn't even know you were reading. I was reading it. It was introduced to me. And I remember sitting in my office and I was like talking to you, and I was like, yo, there's this book, and I don't even know how it came up, but we were talking about, and it was The Laws of Thinking. And you were like, yo, I'm reading that book. And I was like, what? Like you're reading that book? And I was like, hold on. And we start talking about that. You got it up there?
I got it over my shoulder.
Yes, Bishop Bernard. And I'm like, yo, you're reading that book? And I was like, I'm reading that book. And we start talking about that, and those of you who are not familiar, Bishop Bernard, check it out, Jordan. Bishop, am I saying it right? Bishop Bernard Jordan, I think it is. Bernard Jordan.
Yep.
Right? So, and if you're familiar with Reverend Run, you're probably familiar with Bishop Jordan. But Bishop Jordan wrote a book called The Laws of Thinking. And I remember reading that book being introduced to me, and I had an opportunity to meet and be amongst Bishop Jordan and read that book. And then when you were like, and we never even talked about that, and you was like, yo, I'm reading this book, The Laws of Thinking.
Yeah, that was nuts.
Bro,
can I talk about that?
That was scary.
Can I talk about that? Because that, like, first of all, that's the first book that I read front to back, and I've read it multiple times. But the crazy thing about that book is that I remember, I don't know if I was in high school or just out of high school. Tom, shout out to T Money. Me and him went looking for the 48 Laws of Power. That was that was getting a buzz. So we were like, hold on, we got to go see what this is about. We went to Barnes and Noble and they didn't have it, but they had that. And I remember like saying, this looked kind of cool. I opened it and saw all the laws, and I'm like, dang, this looks deep. Let me go ahead and grab this for like $20. And I started to read it, and I remember I like the first chapter was challenging. It's like it talk about like the power that we have in us, how we are like God.
Yes.
It's not the image. So I was like, whoa, this is blasphemy. Let me put this down. And I had put it down. But then, like I said, when I was kind of in that funk, I picked it back up. And then like I probably wasn't 2 pages in when you had recommended it, and I said, "Oh, that's a God thing right here. This is a God thing." But to fast forward too, when I got to University of Kentucky, after a year being at school, I ended up moving into a house with three of my guys, and I remember telling them about that book. And when I when I tell you, Ross, like everybody in the house had borrowed it. It was fights over that book and everything, trying to get it back. Like it's real power. It's real power in that text.
Truth.
Like that
Truth.
right there helped me
Truth.
really
Truth.
really organize my thoughts, understand myself, and also understand what I was capable of, what any human being is capable of. Right? And like at that point, I was still the same being that I was when I was out there messing up, just kind of putting the pieces together,
But having and that's the beauty of it, is because the laws of thinking, it really began to break down the power of your thoughts.
Right.
And it may have been hard to even conceptualize, like, yo, are my thoughts things? And it started to break it down, like your thoughts are things. Like, so if you're thinking a certain thing, then you're going to have certain outcomes. So that's how I was in tune to it. And then it's crazy. You talk about UNT Ellis. Shout out to Thomas, who is another one of my favorite. And it's like, and I can't, and I'm not surprised that he would be looking for something like that, because he's another seeker. He's someone who's also seeking the best part. He's seeking, like, yo, what's better? What's best? So y'all looking for the 48 laws of thinking, or the 48 laws of power, but you find the laws of thinking. And it's like, that's what you really needed. At that point, you ain't need, because you really needed the laws of thinking.
Yep. I still to this day, like, that's my doctrine. Like those laws I live by. Like, I haven't picked up that book in probably like 7 years now. And like, but those laws, like, that's my life and doctrine right there. Like, that's what I live by. When I talk about, like looking at taking every decision strategically and looking like, how can I win here? Like that book helped me, that book helped me kind of see how pretty much my whole life is pretty much going to be about me, and like what my thoughts and like what I'm doing with those. Right. Like, that's why I started writing everything down. Right. Like, you talk about the law of attraction and making things real, bringing it to the physical manifestation. Like, I started like, all right, I want this. Like, this is the whole point of plans, right? Like, this is why people make plans, so you make it happen. So it was just some of the simple things where I'm like, like, I never knew that I had all of this. Like, any human being, like, we all got that in us. And that book right there is something special. Like I said, I fought tooth and nail to get this one back from my roommates, because everybody wanted to hold on.
They wanted it. They wanted it, man. Yeah. And shout
out to my boy Eli. I know he was on here earlier. That's
Eli. Yes. Is that more? Is that more?
Yep. Yeah.
Shout out to Eli.
That man right there. That's a true seeker right there, man. That's my brother.
Yo, you had a lot of folks out, man. I saw Rob in here, Rob Colazzo, who another one of my favorite all-time students that I had a chance to learn from, teach. John Howard up in here, man.
My brother.
Like, just crazy. Yo, 06 was one of those, when I look back, and I'm gonna put it like, that was my favorite class, because it reminded me the most of my class. And it reminded me the most of me. Forget about my class. It reminded me the most of me. There were more people in that class that reminded me of me as I was taught than any other class, period. And I always felt like an affinity toward that group, and a connection toward that group. So, a special shout out to that group in that class. And that laws of thinking, Aulander, you talk about the power of attraction. That if there's something that folks can understand in terms of being connected and aligned, you used that word earlier, alignment, being aligned with your thoughts and what you're trying to manifest is so important. It is so, and to think you and I somehow our thoughts were aligning, even though we weren't even connected at that time. We had been connected, but we had disconnected, and then we reconnected through that.
Yeah.
You know, that's the power of thought.
It's
That's the
real, and
power of
it's and
thought.
that like like that. And I know we running short here, but if there's one thing that I definitely want to say is like that worked both ways too, right? So I
Mm.
had to also be disciplined and like making sure I wasn't thinking about the wrong things, right? Like
Yes,
because
because you're manifest.
and
Yes,
all the different religions, no matter who you, it's
yes,
always something that kind of alludes to this, right? Whether it's faith, whether it's energy, right? Like what you think about is going to come
yes.
to
It's when it
pass, right?
comes.
And
Yes,
so it's like that helped me too. Like, all right, I'm stuck in this rut right now. I can't think about this. I got to put myself around people who got
word,
good things going on, so that
word.
my whole vibes change. But yeah, man, I could go on and on about
Bro,
that book.
here's what I'm gonna tell you, Aulander. Um, you owe me a second episode. That's first and foremost. Because I really want to get into your post move, like once you moved out to Kentucky, you know, and the things that you begin to do and the things you're putting in place. We've talked about some of the projects you're working on, you know, and how you're helping to change lives. Your wife is helping to change lives. Like y'all out there doing, you know, doing things for people who need support, who need advocacy, and that's a beautiful thing. So that's first and foremost. But one of the things that I love to ask is, you know, advice to your high school self.
Mm.
Which for you, that's an interesting question, bro. Because I was at your college graduation, but I couldn't be at your high school graduation because you didn't experience that.
Right, right,
And you know, and when you invited me to your college graduation, to be honest, I never thought about like, yo, I don't even got pictures of him from
wow,
his high school graduation.
wow.
You know, so if you don't mind just sharing, if you could go back and give advice to your high school self, what that advice would be and why.
Yeah, for sure. And first, let me shout out my wife. I think that's the one important person who I didn't shout out in here yet. On
True,
this journey we've been on the last 10 years,
true.
has been amazing. Early on, when I first met her, we kind of met because we were doing work like out there in the community, and I realized we had a similar drive and wanting to see
Mhm.
lives, change for the better. So, big shout out to her for being a teammate, early on in that, not just someone who I was doing life with. Um, if I could give my younger self some advice, like I guess it would be two things that I would say, and I hope that's okay. Number one, it would be like be confident to be a leader, right? Like,
Mhm.
um, I always knew people listened to me, like people around me would listen to me, but I was too afraid to lead people the wrong way, so I kind of just fell back
Yes.
into whatever what else was going on. So I would say don't be confident enough to believe in like what you got going on, as far as direction, with people around you. But I will also say to spend. I wish I would have spent more time with some of the people like Robert Colazzo who was in here, right? I
Yes.
wish I would have
Yes.
spent more
Yes.
time with like, big shout out
Yes.
to Heather. She was on here. I did spend a lot of time with her. She was a part
Yes.
of the group that I hung out with. But you had a
Yes.
couple other people on here who I was like, yo, like Anthony Stevenson and them, who I wish I
Yes.
would have been able to build with a little bit more. Like it's a whole lot of people in that '06 class, and it was a lot of people in my inner circle, but it was a whole lot of people who doing big things right now and who had a
Mhm.
whole lot to offer then that I wish I would have invested in and let them invest in me as well. So, spend time with everybody, right? Like, you know, make sure that you bumping shoulders and getting in there with no matter who it is. And I think like that's how you learn and grow, right?
And I think Orlando, the advice that you left, that you just shared, is critical. And from an outside perspective, I'm just going to say this: you were someone, believe it or not, and you mentioned some names here, like I wish I would have spent more time with them. I guarantee you, those same folks that you just said would be like, yo, he always made time for us.
Mm.
And that was one of the things, bro, that for you that I always saw is like you made time for everybody. And you can beat yourself up about it, like, I damn, I wish I would have been like I could have been more for that person. I could have been more. But that's what at the end of the day, someone put in here, leaders, that's what leaders do. Kev
Mm.
Richardson. Shout out to Kev
Shout
Richardson.
out to
That's
Kev
what he
doing big things.
yo,
Big
salute, bro.
things. Right.
That's what because you had a way of making everybody seem important. And that was something that I always valued in you as an individual. And I think that's important. I think that's the number one testament of leadership is that can you make everybody seem like they got something to do with everything?
Mm.
And I feel like, you always had that. I feel like you had that, fam. So I get what you're saying. I definitely do. But I also understand that you had that impact on people. And that was one of the things that attracted me to you,
Mm.
is that you had that magnetic attraction, and that ability to attract those and to lead. And I'll never forget, bro. I will never ever forget that. And a lot of what I believe in came from our relationship, in terms of mentorship and so on and so forth. So, a salute to you, for all that you've done. And I'm very just happy to be a part of it, bro. Word up.
I appreciate it, and and you and Tiffany, like I said, y'all know the role that y'all played in my life, and I can never thank you all enough for all the support, and everything. So I definitely appreciate that, and you definitely helping me kind of see some of the things that I was doing at a young age, and I'm always gonna beat myself up because I always want to be better, right? I always want to keep all of that at the front of my
True.
mind. So I appreciate all of that.
No
And
doubt.
everybody that's in the comments tonight too.
No doubt, bro. We appreciate you, Orlando. Like we appreciate you, all of us. And all of the folks that have been on here tonight. Um, all of the folks who, that lives you've touched and whose lives touch you. We definitely appreciate that. And I'm looking forward to coming back and doing another episode with you, man, because I think we got to get to that second part. I know you and your wife, I know y'all doing a lot of nonprofit work, that we want to learn more about. And what you're doing in terms of education, I want to learn more about that. You as a father, like there's so many other things, that I want that we need to hear that I hope you can share with us. I
For
won't say we
sure.
need to hear about, but I hope that that you can share with us. Anything that you want to leave off with saying, anything that you want to say. There's a lot of love, fam, coming through for you. Crazy love, bro. Crazy. I can't even keep up with the comments of pulling the comments up of things that are coming up. So if there's anything that you want to say, feel free, bro.
I just want to say shout out to everybody that's out there. I love y'all. It's a lot of people who I really didn't get to talk to probably since I left Long Branch. And the next time I come home, I'm a definitely I'm a broadcast that message across Facebook or something so everybody know. And because I want to link up. I want to link up with some folks who I had a history with, haven't had a
Word.
chance to build with since. So shout out to everybody. Keep doing you, and hopefully we cross paths again.
Yo, that's what's up, man. That's what's up, man. And I'm gonna go back to your old affectionate name, man. Like that.
Yeah,
That was
right,
like
right.
that. Yo, that's what's up. And I'm coming for everybody. This is. I feel like everybody's story needs to be showcased. So I'm coming for all of y'all. You know, folks of y'all are in the comments. I'm coming for y'all too. I want everybody's story because I think these stories are important. And I think that they need to be showcased and highlighted. But I appreciate you, Aulander, and you will always have a special part in my life. Crazy special part of my life. And you know, I'm looking forward to seeing you continue to grow and seeing you continue to impact, you know, others. And I'm happy to have had the opportunity to share some time with you. Oh, my big sis just hopped on. Thank you, big sis.
Shout
She
out,
hopped
shout
on.
out.
Like, listen, it's always good when the big sis hop on. But appreciate you. And yo, man, I love you, bro.
Love you
It's not the
too.
first time I said it. And you know how you know how it feels. You know how we feel about each other. And I look forward to reconnecting with you soon. So to all of you who joined in tonight, thank you for joining in. This was a special, crazy special episode for me personally. Very proud of this brother and proud of, you know, how he has he's navigated some difficult situations while also staying connected to the people who have always loved him and who he has always loved. And I think that that is very, very important. So I will always salute him for that. So shout out to everybody who joined in. We are going to be signing off from the Purpose and Practice podcast. Salute to everybody and peace to you. And we will see you all next week when we have our next episode. So brother Aulander, yo, thank you again for your time, bro.
No problem. Anytime.
Word. Peace out, everybody.
It's a 9-chord banger. Dr. Ross dropping knowledge to the masses. Man, you now tuned in to Purpose and Practice. Ayy, yeah, Purpose and Practice. Keep your mental sharp, learn all the tactics. Dr. Ross dropping knowledge to the masses. Man, you now tuned in to Purpose and Practice. Ayy, yeah, Purpose and Practice.